Chapter 9. Prigio Has an Idea. A weary and way-worn little bird was Prince Ricardo when he fluttered into the royal study window in the palace of Pantufia. The king was out in a council meeting. Knowing that Ricardo had the right things all in right order, he was least anxious. He was not in the least anxious about him. The king was out, but Semiramis was in. Semiramis, the great gray cat sitting on the big book on top of the library steps. Now, Semiramis was very fond of birds, and no sooner did Ricardo enter and flutter on the table than Semiramis gathered herself together and made one fell spring at him. She just caught his tail feather. In all his adventures, the prince had never been in great danger. He escaped, but no more, and went flying around the ceiling, looking for a safe place. Finally, he perched on the chandelier that hung from the roof. Here he was safe, and so weary was he that he put his head under his wing and fell fast asleep. He was awakened by the return of the king, who threw himself on the sofa and exclaimed, "Oh, that prime minister! His dome is as heavy as lead, much heavier, in fact." Then his majesty lit a cigar and took up a volume. He was certainly a sad bookworm. Dick now began to fly about the room, brushing the king's face and trying to attract his notice. "Poor little thing," said his majesty, and Dick alighted and settled on his breast. And seeing this, Semiramis began to growl as cats do when they're angry, and slowly approached his majesty. "Get out, Semiramis," said the king, and lifting her by the neck, he put her out of the room and shut the door, at which she remained, scratching and mewing. Dick now crept out of the royal waistcoat and flew to the king's ear, twittered and pointed out to the window with one claw, and lying down on his back pretended to be dead. Then he got up again, twittered afresh, and pointed to the wishing cap, and finally convinced the king that this was no common fowl. "An enchanted prince or princess," said Prigio, "such as I have often read. Who can it be? Not Jacqueline. She could change herself back in a moment. By the way, where is Jacqueline?" He rang the bell and asked the servant to look for the princess. Semiramis tried to come in, but was caught and shut downstairs. After doing this, the man replied that Her Royal Highness had not been in the palace all day. The king rushed to the crystal ball and looked all over the world, but no princess. He became very nervous, and at that moment Dick lighted on the crystal ball and put his claw on the very hill where Jacqueline disappeared. Then he cocked his little eye at the king. "Nay, she is somewhere in the unknown center of South America," said his majesty. "Somewhere behind Mount Rorme, where nobody has ever seen. I must look into this." Then he put on his wishing cap and wished that the bird would assume his natural shape, and if he was under enchantment, there seemed to be a good reason to believe. Instantly, Dick stood before him. "Ricardo!" cried his king in horror. "And in this disguise, where have you been? What have you done with Jacqueline? Where are the 7-league boots? Where the sword of sharpness? Speak! Get up!" For Dick was kneeling, weeping bitterly at his royal feet. "Oh, law," said Dick. "Poor Jacqueline! She was the best girl and the prettiest and the kindest, and the earthquakers got her, and the giants got the other things." Dick grinned, crying bitterly. "Calm yourself, Ricardo," said his majesty, very pale, but calm and determined. "Here, take a glass of port and explain how all this happened." Dick drank the wine, and then told his miserable story. "You may very well sob. You didn't use a cap of darkness. Mere conceit. But there is no use crying over spilt milk. The thing is to rescue Jacqueline. And what are we to say to your mother?" "That's the worst of all," said Dick. "Mother will break her heart." "I must see her at once," said the king, "and break it to her." This was a terrible task. The queen had just confidence in her Prigio that as soon as she dried her tears, remarking that heaven would not desert Jacqueline, that the king would find a way out of this trouble. His majesty retired to his study and put his head in his hands and thought and thought. "The thing is, of course," he said, "to destroy the earthquaker before he awakens. But how? What can kill such a monster? Parting him with a sword would only stir him and make him more vicious. And I know of no other beast that can set against him, as I did with the fire beast and the ice beast when I was young. Oh, for an idea!" Then his mind somehow went back to the council and the ponderous stupidity of the prime minister. Heavier than lead, said the king. Oh, George, I have a plan. If I could get to a place where they keep the stupidity, I could carry it away enough to flatten the earthquaker. Then he remembered how, in an old Italian poem, he had read about all the strange lumber room of odd things which is kept in the moon. That is the advantage of reading. Knowledge is power. And you mostly get knowledge that is really worth having out of good old books, which people do not usually need. If the stupidity is kept in stock up in the moon and comes to here, falling naturally down on earth in small quantities, I might obtain enough for my purpose, thought the king. But how to get to the moon? There are difficulties about that. But difficulties only sharpened the ingenuity of this admirable king. The other fellow had a flying horse, said he. By the other fellow, Prince Prigio meant the Italian knight, Astolfo, who in old times visited the moon, and there found and brought back the common sense to his friend Orlando, as you may read in the poem of Aristo. Now, reasoned King Prigio, if there's a flying horse at all, it is in the stables of the King of Delhi. I must look into this. Taking the magic spyglass, the king surveyed the world from China to Peru, and sure enough, there was a famous flying horse in the king's stable at Delhi. Hastily the king thrust his feet into the shoes of swiftness, so hastily indeed that, as the poet said, he madly crammed his left-hand foot into the right-hand shoe. But this, as many people think, is a sign of good luck. Then he put the shoes on the proper feet, and in a few minutes he was in the presence of the great mogul. The monarch received him with some surprise, but with stately kindness, and listened to Prigio while he explained what was happened. I am only too happy to assist your adventurous prince, remarked the great mogul. This is like old times. Every horse in my stable is at your service, but, as you say, only the flying horse is of any use to you in this expedition. He clapped his hands, and the Grand Vizier appeared, and the king gave orders to have the flying horse saddled at once. Then he presented Prigio with a large diamond, and came down to the courtyard to see him off. He's fresh, said the groom who held the bridle. He has not been out of the stable for 300 years. Prigio sprang into the saddle among the salams, and of the dusky multitude, and all the ladies of the seraglio waved their scented handkerchiefs out of the windows. The king, as had been instructed, turned a gold knob on the saddle of the flying horse, then kissed his hands to the ladies, and giving the steed his head, cried, in excellent Persian, "To the moon!" Up flew the horse as an easy action, and the king's head nearly swam with the swiftness of the flight. Soon the earth below him was no bigger than a top, spinning on its own axis. See geography books for this. And, as night fell, the earth was only a great red moon. Through the night rode King Prigio, until the silver dawn of the moon. And now all became clear and silvery. The coast of the moon came into sight, with white seas breaking on them, and at last the king reached the silver walls and the gate of opal. Before the gate stood two beautiful ladies. One was fair with yellow locks, the color of the harvest moon. She wore a crown of golden snake and white water lilies, and her dress now shone white, now red, now golden. In her hand was a golden pitcher that sheds the dew, and a golden wand. The other lady was as dark as night, dark eyes, dark hair. Her crown was of poppies. She held an ebony wand of sleep. Her dress was the deepest blue, sewn with stars. The king knew that they were the maidens of the bright and the dark side of the moon, as you see the side, and of the side that no one has ever seen, except from King Prigio. He stopped the flying horse, and turning the other knob in the saddle, alighted, and bowed very low to each of the ladies. "Daring mortal, what make you here?" they asked. And the king told them about Jacqueline and the earthquaker, and how he needed the great weight of stupidity to flatten him out with. The ladies heard him in silence. Then they said, "Follow us." And they flew lightly beside the flying horse. Well, they had crossed the bright side of the moon, above the silver palaces and silver seas, and reached the summit of the mountains of the moon, which separate the bright from the dark side. "I may go no further," said the bright lady, "and beyond all you see all is darkness and heavy sleep." Then she touched Prigio with her golden wand with twisted serpents, and he became luminous, light raying out of him. And the dark lady, too, shone like silver in the night, and on they flew over black rocks and black rivers till they reached a huge mountain, like a mountain of coal, many 1,000 feet high, for its head was lost in the darkness. Dark Moon Lady struck the rock with her ebony wand and said, "Open!" And the cliffs opened like a door, and there were within the mountain. "Here," said the dark lady, "is storehouse of all the stupidity. Hence it descends like showers, like stardust on the earth, whenever this mountain, which is a volcano, is an eruption. Only a little of the stupidity reaches her, and that is only invisible dust. Yet you know how weighty it is, even in that form." "Indeed, madam," said the king, "no one knows it better than I do." "Then make your choice of the best sort of stupidity for your purpose," said the dark lady. And in the light which flowed from their bodies, King Prigio looked at the various kinds of solid stupidity. There it lay in masses, the stupidity of bad sermons, the ignorant reviewers, the bad poems, the bad speeches, dreary novels, foolish statesmen, ignorant mobs, fine ladies, and idle naughty boys and girls. The king examined all of them, and all were very, very heavy. But when he came to the stupidity of the learned, the dull, blind writers on Shakespeare and Homer and the Bible, then King Prigio saw that he had found the sort he wanted, and that a very little of it would go a long way. He could never have got it in the saddle of the flying horse if the dark lady had not touched it with her ebony wand, and made it light to carry till it was wanted for its purpose. When he needed to use for it, he was to utter a certain spell which she taught him, and then the lump would recover its natural weight. So easily he put the great block on his saddle-bow, and he and the dark lady flew back to reach the crest of the mountains of the moon. There she touched him with her ebony wand, and the silver light which the lady had shed on him died from his face and body, and he became like any other man. "You see your way," said the dark lady, pointing to the bright moon of earth, and shining far off in the heavens. Then he knelt down and thanked her, and murmured strange words of blessing which he did not understand, but her face was brave and kind, and he thought of Queen Rosalind, his wife. Then he jumped on the flying horse, and galloped down and down till he reached the palace gate. He called for Ricardo, and set him behind him on the saddle, and away they rode above the land and the wide seas till they saw the crest of the hollow hill, where Jacqueline was with the earthquaker. Beyond it they marked the glittering spires and towers of Mantua, the city of the sun. And thither, said King Prigio, who had been explaining how matters stood, to Ricardo, we must ride, for I believe they stand in great need of our assistance. "We'd better not go to Jacqueline first, sir," said Ricardo. "No, I think mine is the best plan. Manoa, whose golden spires and pinnacles are shining below us, in the city of the sun, which Sir Walter Raleigh and the Spaniards could never find. So that man doubted its existence. We are needed here, to judge that by the angry crowd in the marketplace. Oh, how they howl!